Right now on Morning News Now, a party united. This morning, Republicans rallying behind Donald Trump and his new running mate, JD Vance. The former president's fiercest critics from his own party now pledging their support at the Republican National Convention.
You don't have to agree with Trump 100% of the time to vote for him. Take it from me.
Now the stage is set for Trump's VP pick to introduce himself to America tonight. We'll take you to Milwaukee as day 3 of the RNC gets underway. All this as we learn more about the assassination attempt against Mr. Trump. We'll bring you the latest from investigators. Plus, embattled Senator Bob Menendez found guilty on all counts in his federal corruption trial. Now, more lawmakers calling on him to step down. More on the verdict, the reaction on Capitol Hill, and what happens next. Also this morning, damage across the Midwest after a powerful summer storm slammed several states with heavy rain, dangerous winds, and reports of tornadoes. It's not over yet. We are tracking the conditions as the storm system moves east. And a controversial crowning will introduce you to the first ever, get this, Miss Artificial Intelligence, and why the futuristic competition is raising alarms in the real-life pageant community. It was only a matter of time, I guess.
Exactly. We'll have to explain this one to people because it's still something I'm kind of wrapping my brain around. Good to have you with us this morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to get started this morning with the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee and a substantial show of party unity for former President Trump.
Several of his primary rivals came together on the second night of the convention. That included Mr. Trump's chief challenger, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. She was the last Republican to suspend their campaign for president, staying in the race until March, long after others had dropped out, and declining to immediately endorse Trump after ending her campaign. But during her speech last night, Haley struck a very different tone, throwing her support behind her former rival.
I'll start by making one thing perfectly clear. Donald Trump has my strong endorsement, period. I'm here tonight because we have a country to save. And a unified Republican Party is essential for saving her.
Today, Vice Presidential nominee JD Vance will headline day 3 of the GOP convention. The Ohio senator will speak to Republican delegates and to the nation tonight.
Meanwhile, senators are planning to hold a teleconference today to discuss last weekend's assassination attempt against the former president. The call is expected to include briefings from the Secret Service and the FBI.
We have full coverage ahead this hour, including international reaction to the GOP convention, plus the latest on the FBI investigation into the assassination attempt of the former president. Let's begin with NBC's Garrett Haake, who joins us from the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Garrett, good morning. So last night, the Republican Party closed ranks around the nominee as formerly fierce rivals of Donald Trump stood before the delegates and embraced him. Walk us through the highlights of the second day of the convention.
Yeah, good morning, Joe. There was a lot of energy in this building last night, really throughout the course of the events. The official theme was Make America Safe Again, with a focus on crime and on immigration, 2 of Donald Trump's pet issues, if you will. But the secondary theme was definitely something to the effect of you can come home again, or that the MAGA movement would welcome the converts. We saw that from so many of the speakers last night, whether it was Marco Rubio, who ran against Trump in 2016, to his 2024 primary rivals, all of whom have since bent the knee and come back and endorsed Donald Trump in one form or fashion or another, trying to tell people who might be skeptics of him still in the party, or perhaps independents or undecided voters out there, come on in, the water's fine. Here's some of what we've heard last night from some of those former Trump rivals turned backers.
You don't have to agree with Trump 100% of the time to vote for him. I haven't always agreed with President Trump. But we agree more often than we disagree.
My fellow Republicans, let's send Joe Biden back to his basement, and let's send Donald Trump back to the White House.
Donald Trump is the president who will actually unite this country, not through empty words, but through action.
Those endorsements from former rivals meant to be kind of an olive branch to particularly Republicans out there who, for whatever reason, find Mr. Trump distasteful or weren't necessarily ready to vote for him, saying, come on back in, the party needs you, Joe.
Hey, Garrett, it's Savannah. I want to ask you about something that we saw happen on X. Third-party candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's apologizing after his son posted a video there showing a phone call between Kennedy and Mr. Trump on Sunday. This was the day after the assassination attempt. Tell us what we learned about their call, but then also the state of the relationship between these two candidates.
Yeah, this was a wild little story that blew up for a while yesterday morning, in which Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s son posted this video on X of the phone call between RFK Jr. and Donald Trump the day after the assassination attempt, in which Trump is heard talking in sort of a strange way about vaccines. It's a pet issue for RFK Jr., who's a vaccine skeptic. He believes in a number of conspiracy theories about vaccines. The video was quickly pulled down, and RFK Jr. apologized, saying that a documentary film crew had been working with him behind the scenes, that he didn't even know this video existed. But the nature of the call is interesting in and of itself, because here you hear Donald Trump and RFK Jr. kind of playing footsie on a conspiratorial issue here in a way that Donald Trump never talks about it in public. Remember, Kennedy's presence on ballots in a lot of these states is one of these things that's kind of an X factor in this whole race. Having a third-party candidate, someone with the name Kennedy, is thought to be in many corners something that could hurt Joe Biden. So the idea of Trump staying cozy with Kennedy here behind the scenes is just one of those fascinating subplots that we're going to need to watch as we get into the fall of this election.
Garrett, let's quickly look ahead to day 3 of the convention. It's going to be highlighted by newly minted VP nominee, Ohio Senator JD Vance. He's given a speech tonight. A lot of Americans don't know much about him. Maybe they know nothing about him. Real quick, what can we expect to hear?
Yeah, Joe, I'm told this isn't only J.D. Vance's first time speaking at a Republican convention, it's also his first time attending. He is that new on the national political scene. So expect to hear a lot about his biography, introducing himself to voters, and trying to provide some of that same permission structure I was talking about with Mr. Trump's former rivals. Vance was, of course, a very loud Trump critic as recently as 2016. Now he's a convert to the movement. He is going to be a big player to Donald Trump's base, and especially to the young men who the Trump campaign thinks are going to be their keys to winning. Now, the official theme tonight is Make America Strong Again, with a focus on foreign policy. But I do think it's more about introducing Vance than it is about any other consistent message that we're going to hear from the speakers tonight.
All right, Garrett, thank you so much.
Let's bring in NBC News International correspondent Janice McAfee to talk about the global reaction to all of this news. Janice, good morning. Let's start on Trump's pick for vice president. So Ohio Senator JD Vance, he's known to be kind of more isolationist in terms of members of the Republican Party. What does his nomination signal to international leaders about what could be in store if Trump is elected once again?
Well, in J.D. Vance, Donald Trump has somebody who will affirm his views on the world, on NATO, on Ukraine, on China. They are isolationist and put America first. And they widen a rift on foreign policy within the Republican Party by confirming this tilt away from the old guard when it comes to foreign policy. Vance is skeptical of U.S. support for Ukraine. He is opposed to continued funding. Like Trump, they don't see Vladimir Putin as a threat to Europe or the U.S., which is sending a shudder through Europe. On Israel, they are both on side with Israel, saying that they will help, quote, get the job done. This is the one foreign policy point that has wide support across the party. And they are both equally as blunt on China, in seeing China as a major competitive threat to the U.S. Look, J.D. Vance is not a counterbalance to Donald Trump's worldview, and nor is he likely to contradict him. What remains to be seen is the extent to which Trump will listen to J.D. Vance on foreign policy if they're elected in November.
Janice, let's focus on Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's willing to work with Trump if the former president is elected in November. Critics worry another Trump administration would mean a huge shift in U.S. policy when it comes to Ukraine and the European Union. So what do we know about where both Vance and Trump stand on the future of funding to Ukraine, especially amid the war with Russia?
Well, they are both pushing for a settlement
in the war in Ukraine, even if it means conceding territory to Russia, and even if it's viewed by other countries as a victory for Vladimir Putin. So, yes, there would be a huge shift for Ukraine and for Europe, and that would resonate in other regions of the world that wouldn't mind seeing a NATO defeat. Vance said in a podcast, quote, "I don't really care what happens to Ukraine one way or another." He's firm in the belief that the U.S. is already stretched too thin. Volodymyr Zelensky said this week that he still believes that most of the Republican Party still supports Ukraine and that he's not afraid of working with a second Trump administration. But for European leaders who had already been preparing for a changed relationship with the U.S., they're now buckling up. With JD Vance declaring that the U.S. would shift its focus away from Europe and toward China because there would be trade fallout with that as well.
Janice, of course, the relationship between the U.S. and China hangs in the balance here as well. We know Trump has a record of being tough on China when it comes to trade. Do we expect any of his policies to change this time around?
No. It basically doesn't matter who's in the White House come next year. There is a very rough U.S.-China relationship, and it's not likely to grow any warmer under a second Trump administration. Vance and Trump are both talking about huge tariffs on all Chinese goods. Their concern is competition. Quote, this is Vance. "If we're going to lose a war, it will be because we have allowed our primary rival to become arguably our most powerful industrial competitor." There's also the argument here, a couple of points to make, that China would welcome a second Trump presidency because they function on transactional diplomacy and transactional trade. And with China, they know where they stand with Trump. There's also, doesn't seem to be any guarantee the extent to which a Biden administration would want the U.S. to involve itself in Taiwan if China were to make a move, as President Trump says, unless Taiwan pays for its own defense. And just lastly, there is the sense here that maybe a second Trump administration would hold the U.S. back. As one strategist described to me, it would, quote, make America unsuccessful again. Joe and Savannah.
Janice Mackey-Frayer, thank you very much. And NBC News Now will have coverage of Day 3 of the Republican National Convention throughout the day, of course, and our extensive live coverage begins at 4 p.m. Eastern. VP nominee JD Vance will address the convention tonight. That will get underway after 9 p.m. Eastern, and you can watch it here on NBC News Now as well as on NBC.
We want to turn to the other major story of the week, the attempted assassination of former President Trump. Let's bring in NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley for the latest on the investigation. So, Julia, NBC News is learning that before Saturday's shooting, security around Mr. Trump was increased in recent weeks. It's because of intelligence the U.S. obtained about an alleged Iranian plot to kill him. We do understand this is not linked to Saturday's assassination. Still, what are we hearing from U.S. officials about this threat, and what is Iran saying?
That's right. We don't believe that Crooks was in any way linked to this Iranian threat, but there's a lot of scrutiny around what the threats around Mr. Trump, the former president, are because of this attempted assassination. And what the White House is saying is that they've received a number of tips that they've passed along to the Trump campaign, to Trump, about Iran wanting to threaten Trump. The thing Iran is saying is that they want to get their justice just through the election. They think that Trump will be defeated in November, and that their justice, though, is all about Trump ordering the assassination of General Soleimani in Iran. So this is all what it centers around. We also can't remove the fact that a future Trump administration would meet a much more hawkish approach toward Iran. His former national security advisor was John Bolton, someone who basically wanted to obliterate Iran. This is an administration that is not friendly to Iran. Not that we've had many friendly administrations from the U.S. to the Iranians, but this was a threat that they saw escalating. The other thing to look at, just from a law enforcement perspective, is, yes, Secret Service somehow increased their coverage around and added more to Trump's Secret Service detail. What does that look like? Because as we know, there's a lot of scrutiny about what Secret Service did not have prepared going into Saturday, which is why this gunman was able to make this shot anyway. So if this is increased security, what did decreased security look like?
It's a great question, Julia, one I'm sure are on the minds of a lot of people at home. Where do things stand with that investigation into the gunman behind Saturday's attempted assassination? Any closer to learning a motive?
Into the gunman, still not a lot of information. I've been speaking with some folks who said that, you know, they were able to obtain his phone. They're going through that. They're going through receipts, seeing things he might have been interested in, his Google searches. These are all things that you would typically find from someone plotting such an assassination. But it seems that he was someone who was previously pretty quiet. He was a registered Republican. It doesn't seem that he had a big online presence posting about how he didn't like Donald Trump. It's really quite shocking how little information he shared publicly about his political views. Some people who knew him growing up say he was bullied in school. He was a quiet person, but not a lot of warning signs that Crooks was about to make this drastic move.
Julia, you mentioned scrutiny. There are still a lot of unanswered questions about how local law enforcement and the Secret Service operated in the lead up to the shooting, especially when it came to securing the roof the shooter was on. Anything new about that?
That's right. I mean, in the beginning, the first 24 hours after this shooting, we saw Secret Service, especially their spokespeople, point a lot of fingers at local law enforcement, saying that this was outside of the Secret Service perimeter, this roof that Crooks got his position on, and so that essentially fell to local law enforcement. But since then, they've had to take more responsibility, saying that ultimately the plan and all of the security to keep a protectee like Trump safe falls to the Secret Service. Here's what the director told ABC about how the buck stops with her.
This is an event that should have never happened.
Who is most responsible for this happening?
What I would say is that the Secret Service is responsible for the protection of the former president.
So the buck stops with you?
The buck stops with me. That building in particular has a sloped roof at its highest point. And so, you know, there's a safety factor that would be considered there, that we wouldn't want to put somebody up on a sloped roof. And so, you know, the decision was made to secure the building from inside.
A little surprising that they wouldn't want to put someone up on a sloped roof. If you've seen videos of Crooks actually crawling up this roof, it doesn't look to be particularly sloped. And now we're trying to figure out who exactly that local law enforcement is. There were a number of state and local agencies responsible that day. Now there are a lot of questions about who exactly would have been able to have purview of that building and where exactly the communication went wrong. We know they were looking for him in the crowd. Secret Service knew local law enforcement were looking for a suspicious person. How was he able to get up on that roof really for so long and be able to get into that crucial and critical and fatal for some position?
Still so many unanswered questions. Julia Ainsley, thank you so much.
Well, here in New York City, a jury found New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez guilty on all counts in his federal corruption trial on Monday. The jurors deliberated for roughly 12 and a half hours over 3 days before convicting Menendez on 16 charges, including bribery, extortion, and acting as a foreign agent to aid the governments of Egypt and Qatar.
Senator Menendez is scheduled to be sentenced in October, but following his conviction, calls for him to resign are increasing within his own party. Joining us now to discuss the verdict, NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley and NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos.
Good morning to both of you. Ryan, let's get started with you. What else can you tell us about this verdict and what we are now hearing from Menendez?
Yeah, so the jury was really dealing with some, pretty overwhelming evidence in this case, including some of those really famous photos of those gold bars and that cash that was found at Senator Menendez's home. But Senator Menendez is pushing back even after this jury verdict. A jury of his peers convicted him. Here's what he said. He said, "I am deeply disappointed by the jury's decision. I have every faith that the law and the facts did not sustain that decision and that will be successful upon appeal." And that we will be successful upon appeal. I have never violated my public oath. I have never been anything other than a patriot of my country and for my country. So some strong words there from Senator Menendez.
Danny, let's talk exactly what Ryan was talking about there. You've got those strong... Oh, is there a soundbite? Sorry.
Do we have sound?
Do we have a soundbite? No. Okay. Danny, that's all. Apologies. We'll have you talk
machine,
instead.
Danny.
I mean, what was your reaction to the verdict? I mean, those images of the gold bars were so strong. Is this what you expected?
I couldn't agree with you more. You see those images of the gold bars there. They were the star of this case, not Menendez, but those gold bars. And government prosecutors are very good at their job. They know evidence like that is very sticky. You see the gold bars there. And for many of us, we're looking at that saying, oh, that's what gold bars look like, because we don't deal in gold bars. If you're looking at that and saying, wow, hadn't seen one of those before, you're not alone.
Small.
It's smaller than I thought. There's a 1 ouncer. I've never been paid in gold bars. It's something that most of us don't see, and the government knows that was going to be a piece of evidence that was going to take center stage and be very sticky for the jury, because it's even more shocking, I guess I would say, than bundles of cash. And by the way, even the cash was incriminating here, because Menendez introduced evidence that there was he only took out increments of $400. In fact, the government introduced that evidence, and yet he had the cash bundled in $10,000 stacks. That doesn't seem like incrementally taking out $400 over time. We wouldn't go home and then bundle these into the $10,000 stacks. So even the cash was incriminating. And the bottom line is these cases are very difficult to defend, because the government doesn't need a written contract between both sides saying, hey, here's our quid pro quo. Instead, they show all the goodies that each side received, all the benefits, and they let the jury draw the inference.
Ryan, let's talk about what this means now. I mean, first job, 40 Senate Democrats have called on Menendez to resign. Complicating this, of course, is that he's running for re-election, but as an independent. With a potential threat of being expelled, is there any precedent for him to be removed from office?
There are ways to remove him, but it's not sort of an automatic thing just because he was convicted in this case. So it's something that is going to really have to go through the process here. And it's really just sort of public pressure that would be sort of forcing him or pushing him to step away. Of course, Andy Kim is the Democratic nominee in New Jersey and is favored to win, even with Senator Menendez on the ballot. But there's still this push from Andy Kim to get Senator Menendez to step down, to leave sort of no question about where this would go, because typically in New Jersey, even though parts of the state are pretty red, it is a Democratic state. Let me read a statement from Senator Schumer here saying, in light of this guilty verdict, Senator Menendez should now do what is right for his constituents, the Senate, and our country, and resign. So obviously there's this big push right now to get Senator Menendez out, but there's no indications at the moment, especially in light of that statement from Senator Menendez saying he plans to appeal this, that he's going to step aside right away.
So, Danny, he is sentenced on October 29th. That's what's scheduled to be right now. He, of course, will appeal the verdict. This is a non-violent crime, but he was convicted on all counts. So what kind of sentence could he be facing here? And also just remind us, what does this appeals process look like?
Joe, I knew you had a defense attorney in you somewhere. You're thinking on all the important points. He is a first-time offender, non-violent. This is a white-collar type crime. That doesn't mean he isn't facing real time, because the loss amounts in white-collar type crimes can boost your sentence, your recommended sentencing guidelines range, into the stratosphere. But depending on what that loss amount is, Menendez may have an argument for a probation-only sentence. It might be a long shot, but ever since a case from over a decade ago by the Supreme Court, the sentencing guidelines are only advisory. So really, in theory, every criminal defendant has a chance at a probation-only sentence. He will appeal. I don't know really what the major appealable issues would be so far. I haven't seen a whole lot in this area. Again, these are really tough cases to win and tough cases to appeal.
Ryan Riley, Danny Ceballos, thank you both very much.
It is another day of summer extremes, with the relentless heat wave and powerful storms sweeping across the country. Today, from the plains to the East Coast, 92 million people are scorching under heat alerts. Well, across the Midwest, thousands are without power after severe storms, and multiple tornadoes swept through that region. NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett has the latest.
Back-to-back nights of tornado sirens wailing through Chicago.
That's one.
The National Weather Service confirming 8 tornadoes touching down in the Midwest, at least one hitting downtown Chicago. Severe storms flipping semi-trucks and knocking down power lines.
The amount of tornadoes that occurred at the same time in a concentrated area, that was unprecedented.
The lines shutting down a portion of the highway. A woman killed in Cedar Lake, Indiana, after a tree fell on her home.
So this fell down Sunday night, and you can see the whole root. It doesn't...
The entire stump is out.
Yeah.
Leaving nearly 150,000 people without power. travelers sheltering in place at O'Hare Airport. Some, like Justin Smolensky, stuck on their plane on the runway through the tornado warnings as air traffic control was evacuated, according to the FAA.
I mean, it was turbulence on the ground. My kids were terrified.
With cleanup ongoing across the region, the threat continues. A dam in Nashville, Illinois, failing due to the storm's rainfall. Residents ordered to evacuate.
The electric company hopes to have power restored by Wednesday afternoon, but it's warning some residents they may have to wait until Friday. Back to you.
Maura Barrett, thank you so much.
Well, for more on this seemingly endless summer of heat, let's get a check on your morning news now weather.
NBC meteorologist Violetta Yaz is with us. Violetta, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Yes, it has been a busy couple of days, or the heat extending longer than a week in some spots, but it's also been pretty stormy, too, across the Midwest in particular. As of late, we, of course, had that derecho that moved through Chicago. Still very stormy last night here, generally south of St. Louis. You can see storms are ongoing here across Arkansas, extending into parts of Oklahoma. Now, that thunderstorm complex happening at the tail end of this front that's actually going to bring some stormy weather toward the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic later today as well. So this is going to be the focal point for severe weather. We'll have this cold front move in. You can see this is more so going to be a late afternoon and evening threat. Here's 8 o'clock. You can see those storms approaching New York, and we'll see that stretch from parts of Virginia all the way up in through New Hampshire. Now, the good news is that front is going to bring those temperatures down a little bit, but as long as folks in Atlanta and the Southeast in general stay out ahead of that front, that heat and humidity is going to continue. So it'll be cooler north of the front. Meanwhile, the heat and humidity will continue across parts of the Southeast, where it'll stay stormy as well. So here's that main threat for later this afternoon and evening. From right around Richmond into interior sections of New England, 48 million people at risk. Damaging winds and large hail going to be the main concerns there. Tornado risk relatively low. These storms should be pretty fast moving. And of course, now switching to the heat, 82 million people impacted. We have some scattered heat alerts, but a little more concentrated here along the eastern seaboard from Boston and New England all the way down through the Mid-Atlantic. We'll see excessive heat develop yet again around the Philadelphia metro area. So something to keep in mind here through the course of this afternoon. It is still going to be sweltering out there with temperatures pretty comfortably into the 90s, heat indices into the triple digits, but then we do start to see that relief as we head into tomorrow. I bet you never thought that 80s would sound good, right? That's where we're at with it. Tomorrow it'll cool down a little bit. I think the humidity will also be noticeable as well. That will be a big improvement. Temperatures do come up a little bit again for the weekend, but not quite as high as what we've been seeing the last couple of days. And I do think with that lower humidity, it'll make a big difference. Saturday, dew points into the 60s, much more comfortable than the 70s that we've been seeing. So we're in this very summer-like pattern, the dog days of summer. It is stifling out there. I think everybody is ready for a little bit of relief here over the course of the
heat wave's been, what, 4 or 5 months now, I feel like?
Pretty much. All year. All year in some spots.
It's nice to see 2 digits instead of 3 digits.
Exactly. We love it.
We're talking about a temperature. Thank you.
Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, a reason to rethink your nighttime routine. Why researchers say a little workout before bedtime could help you get better sleep.
Up first, though, after the break, a trip to Thailand turns to tragedy. What we're learning about the deaths of several guests at a luxury hotel. We will be right back. Welcome back. President Biden is hitting the campaign trail in Nevada, a state he's hoping to win again in this election. But it comes amid signs some House Democrats are still working to convince him to step aside. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has the details.
President Biden back on the campaign trail in Battleground, Nevada, trying to shore up support among black voters at the NAACP convention and aggressively slamming former President Trump's policies.
Because we must lower the temperature in our politics and rates of violence, it doesn't mean we should stop telling the truth.
A new signal that the effort among some House Democrats to convince him to leave the race is not over. 2 sources tell NBC News that in a new draft letter, more than 20 lawmakers are urging the Democratic National Committee not to speed up the nomination of President Biden before the party's convention through a virtual roll call vote, writing, "Stifling debate and prematurely shutting down any possible change in the Democratic ticket is a terrible idea." Lester asked the president about the Democratic efforts to push him aside.
Do you feel like you've weathered the storm on this issue of whether you should be on the ticket or not?
Look, 14 million people voted for me to be the nominee in the Democratic Party. Okay? I listen to them.
The president eager to move forward. calling on Congress to give relief to renters by passing legislation forcing corporate landlords to cap rent increases at 5% or lose federal tax breaks. A key issue, especially in Nevada, where housing costs have skyrocketed. Michelle Lau, a mother of 2 in Las Vegas, has been behind on rent payments. Her husband was laid off earlier this year.
We're definitely living conservatively. And the most challenging thing, I think, is just trying to put food on the table and necessities.
Still, capping rents is controversial among economists, even Democrats, because critics say it discourages new construction.
Our thanks to Gabe Gutierrez for that report. While multiple sources are telling NBC News, President Biden is set to announce a significant wish list of Supreme Court reforms, including term limits for justices. However, many of the proposals would require congressional approval.
Now to what's making headlines around the world, starting in Thailand, where 6 people were found dead in a luxury hotel.
NBC News correspondent Danielle Hamamdin joins us with more. Good morning, Danielle.
Good morning to both of you. That's right. Thai police now believe the 6 foreigners whose bodies were found in a luxury Bangkok hotel late last night were killed by cyanide poisoning. In a press conference, authorities said the suspected killer was among the dead, that the rapid-acting deadly chemical was found on drinking glasses and a teapot. They also said that interviews with relatives of the dead revealed there had been a dispute over debt related to an investment. 4 of the victims are Vietnamese nationals. The other 2 are Vietnamese American. Thai authorities say the FBI had assisted in the investigation. And another investigation, this one on the other side of the world in Paraguay, has resulted in the largest seizure of cocaine in the country's history. Officials there found 4 tons of cocaine stashed in a shipment of sugar bound for Belgium. The president, Santiago Peña, said he hoped the discovery, codenamed Operation Sweetness and valued at $240 million, would disrupt the cocaine trade in a nation that has become known as a drug trafficking hub in the region. And here in the UK, it's a day of pomp and ceremony in Westminster, the day known as the King's Speech, when the monarch outlines the new government's agenda. It's the formal start of the parliamentary calendar, and it's a ceremony filled with traditions going back 500 years. Guys?
Very cool, Danielle. Thank you so much.
Coming up, you could call it plant power.
Why researchers say the kinds of oils you cook with could have long-term effects on your health. Your weekly checkup is next on Morning News Now. Back now with your weekly checkup. This morning, we're looking at a new study that found certain types of exercise may help you sleep better.
And after you've got up, the way you get to work can have a big impact on your health.
More on these stories. Let's bring in NBC News contributor Dr. Natalie Azar. Good to have you with us. So sleep and exercise. Often exercising right before you go to sleep is discouraged, but maybe there are certain exercises that could actually help you sleep better.
I love this. I feel like this morning is a lot of news that everybody can use. But yes, you are right, Joe. Normally we tell people don't do aggressive exercise at night, a lot of aerobic, because it can increase your temperature, increase your heart rate, and disrupt your sleep. So what these researchers were looking at is like, well, what if you actually have just like a sedentary lifestyle and you don't really get a chance to exercise? What if you implemented a little bit of resistance training in the evening? How does that impact your sleep? And specifically what they had people do was every 30 minutes for 3 minutes, so 3 minutes every half an hour over a period of 4 hours, they did a couple of different resistance exercises, like sitting in a squat or doing calf raises, nothing really aggressive. And they found that the people who did that slept longer than the people who sat all evening. But I think the takeaway here is more important than sleeping longer, because most of us have to get up at a certain time every morning, was that their sleep efficiency was the same, meaning that they didn't have more interruptions or anything like that. I think it's the difference between doing a lot of aerobic stuff versus doing more resistance stuff. But I like this. If you're sitting around, my doctor's orders are set a reminder to move and take it slow. So if you're watching your Netflix show, you'd be like, just hold on, keep it going. Don't press pause. I'm going to get up and do my squats, and then you can sit back down. But I think this is kind of like an easy and very practical thing that you can implement in your life, that if you didn't get a chance to exercise in the morning, you can still do it at night. No excuses.
Just don't eat chips in between the
like after your 3 minutes, then go back to like eating all your junk food. Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about the commuting one we mentioned. So this is something about riding your bike to work or walking can help your overall health. Is that just because of the movement of it, or what is it?
It is. And I mean, I think, like, you know, so they basically refer to either cycling on your commute or walking as opposed to something called an inactive commute. And I think we're all faced with this decision every day. I could hop in the subway, I could hop in a cab, or I could walk, right, from the bus to the office or something like that. So they specifically they studied tens of thousands of people over a more than 15-year period, and they found that people who cycled in their commute had a 47% lower risk of death. Can you imagine?
Jeez.
But they also looked at mental health. And basically what they did was they asked people what they did, and then they linked it to hospital records and prescription records. They had a much lower incidence also of prescriptions for mental health issues and things like that. But there's always a but. Cyclists were at a greater risk for traffic collisions. So my take-home points are, or doctor's orders, I should say, that if you are biking, please remember to look both ways. Wear a helmet. There could be like a little, you know, inherent danger in that. And get your steps in at work. If you're not able to walk or cycle just because, like, maybe do your 3-minute, 30-minute thing, you know, even when you're in the office. Every little bit matters.
All right, let's talk about diet.
Yes.
Feels like that's the topic we haven't explored yet. So new research shows that the butter and oil you use can impact the fat composition in your blood. So what should we use?
So, I mean, we all know that cooking with olive oil is preferable to cooking with butter, right? So butter is an animal fat. It's high in saturated fats, and we want people to use more monounsaturated or polyunsaturated fats. But studying this can get a little dicey sometimes, and what these researchers were interested in is, well, let's say that we switch people to, you know, plant-based oils like olive and avocado and canola. What does their lipid profile actually look like? And they found that their whole lipid profile was so much healthier than the butter-based folks, which kind of makes sense. But we know that that can reduce the risk of heart disease and diabetes. So my doctor's orders are, where you can, swap out the butter for these plant-based oils, and try out different ones. You know, some of them definitely have unique flavors, right? And you may prefer one over the other for different sort of, you know, for different sort of dishes. But if you stick to Mediterranean, that's what I tell my patients all the time, that kind of won't steer you wrong. But this is some, like, objective, nice information about how butter, while it's good, may not be the best thing for your heart.
All right, Dr. Azar, as always, lots of fun ones this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, it was. You were right. News you can use. Well, while it might feel like the summer of the never-ending heat wave, it also appears to be a fantastic year for hydrangeas. I have totally noticed this. I bet you've seen them throughout your neighborhood this summer. That is because hydrangeas are experiencing a flourishing that hasn't been seen in years. NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa has more on what's behind this bountiful bloom.
With their heavenly hues of blues and pinks, hydrangeas are a summer staple along the eastern seaboard. And this year, the unmistakable mophead flowers are blooming and booming in an abundance not seen in years, from Connecticut to New Jersey to Massachusetts.
Blue in the front and pink in the back.
Pamela Vasquez and her team tend to the Chatham Bars Inn's 5,000 hydrangea plants. She says the explosion of colorful clusters is weather dependent.
We had a really mild winter, so our buds were protected. And then it was a very rainy, wet spring, which definitely helped the ground. So we knew it was going to be a show.
In Boston, the temperature dropped to 14 degrees last winter. The year before, -10. You can see the difference in the summers that followed.
Well, many vacationers flock to Cape Cod for its shoreline and marine life. Officials here say this sea of color is now drawing crowds of its own like never before.
Had to stop because they take your breath away. They're beautiful.
Is it worth the trip?
Absolutely. Nothing says Cape Cod like hydrangeas by the sea. It just evokes that feeling.
With the curtains soon closing on this summer's hydrangea show, so many already dreaming of the next.
There's never enough hydrangeas for this property. I hope every year is as fabulous as this year.
Emily Ikeda, NBC News, Chatham, Massachusetts.
Gosh, they're beautiful.
It's like cotton candy all over the place.
Yeah, as a new homeowner, though, I've learned the deer love them, so they're difficult.
Okay. Well, coming up, she's a pageant queen, but she's not real.
I am committed to continuing my mission to empower women worldwide.
Up next, more on the crowning of the first ever Miss Artificial Intelligence and why it's sparking concerns in the real-life pageant world. This is Morning News Now.
Two U.S. senators are demanding answers after a major data breach at AT&T back in April.
CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that story and more. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Savannah. Hey, Joe. Good morning to you. Yeah, so a pair of U.S. senators are asking AT&T to answer questions about that massive data breach in April, which led to the illegal downloading of about 109 million customer accounts. Democrat Richard Blumenthal and Republican Josh Hawley are seeking information after AT&T disclosed last week call logs were copied from a workspace on a cloud platform. Now, that data covered about 6 months of records from 2022 from nearly all its wireless customers. Amazon's advertising portal for merchants crashed last night, disrupting Prime Day sales. That's according to several sellers and consultants. The ad portal, it's a self-service system where sellers and brands can adjust their ad budgets and bid on keywords so their products appear in customer search results. In a statement to Bloomberg, Amazon says it's resolving the issue, and Prime Day has gotten off to quite the fast start with sales up nearly 12% in the first 7 hours. That's according to brand manager Momentum Commerce. And Disney is trying to make its streaming business more like Netflix. The Wall Street Journal reports new features in the works include a more personalized algorithm to create content recommendations and customizable promotional art for new shows and movies based on subscribers' taste and viewing history. Disney may also start sending emails to viewers reminding them to finish watching shows. Disney has nearly 230 million streaming customers worldwide versus 270 million for Netflix, guys. All I know is I don't need an email to remind me to finish watching a show. If I'm not watching it, there's a reason.
Exactly. Hey, finish your show. Like, no.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Thanks.
That's a really good point.
Thanks, Savannah. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
You got it.
Well, a recent global beauty pageant came down to 10 finalists, and now it's time to meet the winner, Kenza Layli.
She is a Moroccan influencer. She's passionate about women's empowerment, travel, and family. Here's the catch. She's not real. She's the first ever Miss Artificial Intelligence pageant winner.
In fact, no one in the competition was real, but nearly 2,000 real-life teams from around the world constructed real-looking women. Take a look at them. Those contestants competed by sharing their carefully constructed lives and images on social media for cash prizes. And, of course, the crown sparking both awe but also controversy.
Layli, the winner, says she feels grateful for the opportunity. Take a listen.
I am incredibly grateful for this opportunity to represent AI creators and to advocate passionately for the positive impact of artificial intelligence.
There you go. This raises lots of questions, and to help break this one down, we're joined now by futurist Sinead Beauville. And also, we've got Victory Ram. She is a former pageant competitor and the owner and lead coach at Be Victorious Prep.
Yeah, good morning to both of you. Sinead, I will start with you. So, okay, our viewers probably recognize you. You're somebody who comes on here all the time, helps us understand artificial intelligence, breaks it down for us. You also, though, are a model, so you kind of intersects here on both of these worlds. I understand that you predicted something like this might happen back in 2020. Talk to us. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I did. So when I used to model and a few years ago, studying artificial intelligence and the trajectory and path that it was on, it did seem quite obvious that AI was eventually going to get to a point where you could generate human-like identities that become indistinguishable from humans themselves. And so from the vantage point of a model, I did highlight that it will be possible for AI to eventually serve the job as a fashion model. But kind of the point I make in the article and how I kind of view this pageant, it's not actually a glimpse into the future, but in many ways, this is actually a glimpse into the past, because technological innovations, they actually lead to new behaviors and new markets. So when you think about the internet and smartphones, it led to new types of content, new types of faces, and new storytelling. It's not just about replacing an existing process with AI. So in the case of a beauty pageant, we're not enabling anything new, and there's a whole host of other problems with this. Where I think this becomes interesting in the future, and I make this point in the article, is what about if artificial intelligence allows each of us to be the models in the clothing and in the campaigns that we see? So fundamentally creating new experiences, not just replacing what we've done in the past with technology. It's not just uninteresting, but in some ways problematic.
Sinead, the creator behind the winner is Kenza Layli, a female executive who says she's trying to use this new tech to push creativity and diversity forward. There's a lot of fears you mentioned about the potential for AI, but on the brighter side, is this the kind of person, her getting amplified, does that give you some optimism for where AI is going?
I think it's a very fine line when we use the word diversity and AI and avatars in the same sentence. So, in this case, the AI generated women, well, one, it's beauty through the eyes of an AI, which, consists of all sorts of problems, but they also all follow stereotypical beauty standards across the world. So I'm not entirely sure what the contestants and what the creators mean when they say diversity. And in many ways, AI simply reflects societal biases around things like beauty and amplifies them. So I think we have to tread a fine line when we use the word diversity and AI and kind of fake people.
Yeah, and some of almost like AI and its inherent like biases we can see as this continues to grow because it's being trained, right, on the content that we create as humans. Victory, let's bring you in here. I know you spent most of your life in the pageant space. I mean, what do you think when you hear this? These carefully curated images and personas, but they're all fake. What do you make of this?
I think it's such a shame that this exists in the world. We spend so much time in the pageant industry talking about social media and how it has a negative impact on individuals, on their mental health. We talk about advertising and photoshopping and filters and how it really creates this negative mental image of who we are as individuals. I know when I was competing, maybe I wasn't the tallest, maybe I didn't have this particular look. And I think this just continues to perpetuate this falsehood that pageantry is about fake beauty, fake hair, fake teeth, when people really are out there doing so much more in their communities and really creating a better world for us to live in. It's such a shame that this exists.
Victory, also, how about the fact that it feeds into the unsustainable, unattainable standards of beauty as well?
Absolutely. Like I said earlier, I'm not the tallest. I'm 5'4", but back when I was competing, it was 5'7" and above. Maybe I didn't have the fairest skin. And we see this right here on the screen with the different avatars, with these different pictures. It's creating this false identity, this false thing about diversity and what beauty is. And I really wish that we could move forward as an industry and really see what pageantry is truly about people really creating a better world to live in. It's not about these fake images, fake hair, and fake teeth.
Sinead, when Joe brings up this idea of unrealistic beauty standards and it kind of perpetuating that, of course, I think of young girls. What should families, what should parents think about, not necessarily this particular pageant, this issue, but just as this might proliferate a little bit more, you see women on your Instagram feed, for example, who aren't real. A computer made them, perfect in whatever that person deemed to be that. What does that mean?
Yeah, and we actually already see this with filters on social media. There's been measurable impact on how young girls see themselves when they use these filters that beautify them in certain ways or give them Eurocentric features, and it's already started to cause problems. So I would encourage parents to remind children that your unedited original face is absolutely perfect, and that's all that matters, not necessarily some AI version of what it thinks is beautiful or some additional filter. The unedited faces of people, that's where the true beauty lies.
Sinead, Victory, thank you both very much. Certainly a talker. We appreciate your time. Coming up, she is changing the game.
Up next, we're going to introduce you to one of Team USA's soccer stars set to make history in Paris. This is Morning News Now.
We end this hour with a look at the next generation of soccer stars heading to the Paris Olympics as a part of Team USA.
That includes Naomi Girma. She is breaking barriers as the team's first player of Ethiopian descent. In an interview with NBC Sports, she explains how her success on the field is a testament to her heritage.
If we brought out a soccer ball, could you walk us through how to juggle a ball?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're gonna want to keep your ankle locked. Just right in the middle of your foot. Naomi Girma, soccer, San Jose, California. My parents were both born in Ethiopia. I grew up with a lot of Ethiopian food.
Tell me the benchmarks of Ethiopian food.
Okay, so the first thing you have to have is the injera. It's like the base of everything. And then you rip off little pieces and you pick everything else up with it. So there's meats, different sauces, there's vegetables. Everything is cooked with Ethiopian spices. So if you eat with me, it's probably gonna be spicy.
Oh, that's extraordinary! It's a sensational game of football! A beauty! A moment to remember! Oh my goodness! You can't get more accurate than that.
Where do you get your work ethic from?
Definitely my parents. That was something that they instilled in me and my brother from a young age, and it wasn't just with soccer. If you were gonna do something or try something out, you were gonna work hard and give it your all.
Our thanks to NBC Sports for that feature, getting us ready for the Olympics. Be sure to tune in. Paris Olympics, they start next Friday, July 26th on NBC and on Peacock.
They are coming very quickly. That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Don't go anywhere. The news continues right now. Good morning. Thank you for joining us this Wednesday. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, from rivals to allies.
You don't have to agree with Trump 100% of the time to vote for him.
America cannot afford 4 more years of a weekend at Bernie's presidency.
Republicans working to unify their party with the help of some of former President Trump's former critics. Plus, with Mr. Trump's security in the spotlight following the assassination attempt, what we've learned about an alleged Iranian plot to try and kill the former president. Also this morning, guilty. New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez convicted on all counts in his federal bribery trial. Now, the longtime politician is facing backlash in the Senate. His fellow Democrats tell him to leave or be expelled. We're breaking down what comes next for the disgraced lawmaker. And speaking out, a national anthem makes headlines for all the wrong reasons. Now, country music star Ingrid Andress is responding to criticism of her performance, admitting she was drunk. Her announcement on social media and what comes next for the Grammy-nominated artist. And later in the hour, taking the plunge, the mayor of Paris swims in the Seine. It's part of an effort to prove how clean the river has become. Not everyone's convinced, so will it be safe enough for competition at the Summer Games? We have an expert's verdict.
Would you do it?
I'm going to let other people do it for now. And we'll see what they say.
It's an interesting one.
It's just we're having this discussion so close to the games.
As we said.
It's interesting.
Next week, yeah.
All right, we're going to begin this hour in Milwaukee, where the Republican National Convention continues.
Yeah, the second day of the convention yesterday was highlighted by former President Trump's primary rivals all throwing their support behind the Republican nominee. Tonight, Vice Presidential nominee JD Vance will take center stage when he addresses the convention in his first speech since becoming Mr. Trump's running mate. NBC News senior Washington correspondent and News Now anchor Helly Jackson has the latest from Milwaukee.
Hey there, good morning to you as we head into day 3 of the Republican National Convention here in Milwaukee after another packed house in this convention center on night 2, in which the theme, this team of rivals coming together, former rivals, to support former President Trump. One former aide to Mr. Trump telling me that while he loves loyal supporters, the only thing he may love more is a converted loyal supporter. And there were plenty of those on stage last night.
Overnight, the 2024 Republican nominees front row again, taking in day 2 of the convention, with former President Trump arriving earlier than expected, according to a source familiar with his plans, so he could listen to the speeches from his former primary rivals, from former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley.
I'll start by making one thing perfectly clear. Donald Trump has my strong endorsement, period.
To Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
America cannot afford 4 more years of a weekend at Bernie's presidency.
Their presence, a signal that even those bitterly opposed to a Trump presidency just months ago,
He is unhinged. He is more diminished than he was.
and whom the former president mocked,
You know who Bird Brain is, right, Nikki? Ron has always been a loser.
are now bending the knee and making the case on his behalf.
You don't have to agree with Trump 100% of the time to vote for him. Take it from me. I haven't always agreed with President Trump. But we agree more often than we disagree.
Let's send Joe Biden back to his basement, and let's send Donald Trump back to the White House.
The GOP message, a united front.
Is this Donald Trump's party now?
Absolutely. He is the president. He's going to be reelected as the president again.
Looming over the convention, Saturday's attempted assassination of the former president. Mr. Trump's daughter-in-law, RNC co-chair Laura Trump, hailing his response seconds after being wounded by the gunman.
In the midst of it all, as he was jostled off stage by Secret Service, that he knew how defining that moment would be for our country, and he hoisted his fist in the air.
As allies look to win over skeptical and undecided voters.
We know that in our nation, a lot of people have already made up their mind, so we've got to get out there and do the work and tell the story.
But on a night meant to highlight crime and immigration, plenty of fiery rhetoric aimed squarely at the conservative base.
Joe Biden thinks borders are racist.
And few mentions of Mr. Trump's criminal conviction in the hush money trial or January 6th. Tonight, all eyes on Mr. Trump's running mate, Ohio Senator JD Vance, and the highest profile moment of his young political career so far.
Senator Vance, of course, once a critic of the former president's back in 2016, calling himself a never Trump guy. Obviously, an evolution since then, as he is now on the ticket with him. I'm told by a source familiar with the senator's remarks that we should expect him to lean heavily into the biographical, sharing stories about his upbringing, a discussion that he laid out in his book, Hillbilly Elegy. But really, this is the first time that he's going to be in this high-profile moment on the national stage in his political career, an introduction in so many ways to America. Watch for him to tie his upbringing to some of the key themes that the Trump campaign has tried to hit so far this campaign season: inflation, immigration, and trade. Back to you.
Hallie Jackson, thank you so much. And NBC News Now will have coverage of Day 3 of the Republican National Convention throughout the day. We're going to get an extensive live coverage at 4 p.m. Eastern. VP nominee JD Vance will address the convention tonight. As we mentioned, that will get underway after 9 p.m. Eastern, and you can watch it all here on NBC News Now, as well as on NBC.
The assassination attempt on former President Trump, as you heard, was mentioned often at the Republican National Convention, with the investigation into the shooter's motive intensifying. Well, now NBC News is learning that security around Mr. Trump had already been elevated in recent weeks because of concerns of an alleged Iranian plot to kill him.
NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk joins us now from Butler, Pennsylvania, with the latest on this. Stephanie, good morning.
Hey, Joe and Savannah, good morning to you guys. The Trump campaign tells us that they were told, in their words, in passing about an elevated threat towards the former president, and nothing about that threat coming from Iran. Even so, the security around Donald Trump was ramped up before he even got here in Pennsylvania to that rally.
In the weeks leading up to Donald Trump's rally in Pennsylvania, we're now learning there was already increased security around the former president after U.S. officials obtained intelligence that there may be an Iranian plot to assassinate him. The National Security Council emphasizing there's no connection between the alleged Iranian threat and Saturday's shooting by gunman Thomas Crooks.
We have people that should not be here.
From the Republican convention, Eric Trump vented his frustration over the security operation at his father's rally.
There was some breakdown, and they better get to the bottom of it.
According to multiple officials who have spoken with NBC News, there were warnings about Crooks before he opened fire. Butler Township manager Tom Knights says one of his police officers locked eyes with the gunman on the rooftop.
He was able to pull his head up over the roof. He did, in fact, see an individual on the roof with a weapon.
Knight says that officer was responding to a report of a suspicious person and that other police officers helped boost him up to take a look.
And what did the shooter do?
Turned towards him, had the barrel of his weapon pointed at the officer.
And at that point, the officer's hanging on
Yes.
to the side of the roof,
Yes.
unable to pull a gun out,
Unable to
defend himself, unable to reach his radio.
any of that. Yeah. Strictly defensive movement for him to lower his head, duck.
Knight says Butler Township Police Department was not the local agency responsible for securing the rooftop. The Secret Service says the building was outside their security perimeter and was primarily the responsibility of local law enforcement. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle telling ABC News the agency decided to secure the building from the inside for safety concerns because of its sloped roof at its highest point.
The Secret Service has not responded to NBC News' multiple requests for comment, but they have put out a statement on X in recent days saying that they are thankful to state and local law enforcement for the assistance that they gave them on the ground. They also said they are deeply grateful to those officers who ran towards the gunmen and put themselves in danger. We are also learning today, guys, that Senator Chuck Schumer, according to his office, that there is going to be a phone call with all of the senators, a briefing from FBI, D-N.J, and the Secret Service, all about the failed assassination attempt. Guys, back to you.
All right, Stephanie, thank you.
Well, after 3 days of jury deliberations in a New York courthouse, Democratic Senator Bob Menendez was found guilty on charges of accepting bribes to benefit the governments of Egypt and Qatar. The high-ranking New Jersey senator was convicted on all 16 counts after a sprawling federal investigation into bribery and corruption. Senator Menendez has vowed to appeal. NBC News correspondent, Capitol Hill correspondent, Ryan Nobles has more on Menendez's conviction and what it means for his political future. Ryan, good morning.
Savannah, good morning. And those counts include bribery, extortion, and acting as a foreign agent. Menendez now facing the possibility of decades in prison. And now some of his colleagues on Capitol Hill are calling for him to immediately resign, or they will push to expel him from the U.S. Senate.
Senator Bob Menendez, once a towering figure in the United States Senate, now facing a flurry of calls for his resignation after being found guilty of being part of an elaborate political bribery and corruption scheme. Among those calling for him to step down, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who said in a statement Menendez must do what's right for his constituents, the Senate, and our country, and resign. And overnight, fellow Jersey Democrat Cory Booker telling MSNBC's Rachel Maddow he would lead an effort to expel the embattled senator if he doesn't resign.
If he refuses to do that, many of us, and I will lead that effort to make sure that he's removed from the Senate.
The verdict brings to an end a years-long investigation and legal battles against Menendez, who is on trial for the second time for political corruption. First trial ended with a hung jury. This time he was found guilty on all 16 counts. Federal prosecutors who tried the case said the verdict demonstrates that no one, even a powerful senator like Menendez, is above the law.
His years of selling his office to the highest bidder have finally come to an end.
Menendez was convicted of using his influence as the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to take actions that benefited the governments of Egypt and Qatar. In exchange, he received bribes from 3 businessmen in the form of gold bars, a Mercedes-Benz given to his wife, and close to $500,000 in cash, prosecutors said. The senator's defense team arguing he kept cash because of his family's escape from communist Cuba and a distrust in banks and institutions.
I have never violated my public oath. I have never been anything but a patriot of my country and for my country.
Now, if Menendez refuses to resign on his own, the Senate still could move to expel him. But the last time a senator was expelled was back in 1862, when a group of senators were removed for their support of the Confederacy during the Civil War. Savannah.
All right, Ryan Nobles, thank you so much.
Let's bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Allie Vitale with more on this. So, Allie, we just heard from some of the Democrats who are calling for Menendez to step down. That includes Majority Leader Schumer. Who else is speaking out, and what are they saying?
Look, Schumer is an important one because even before this verdict came down, and frankly, even before the trial began, 31 Democratic senators came forward already and said Menendez should leave the Senate. He should resign his seat. That, of course, didn't happen. We've seen Menendez take a defiant posture throughout this entire period of months. Now we're seeing him continue to do that as he vows to appeal this decision, this verdict. But still, after Schumer came forward saying that Menendez should resign, that sort of opened the floodgates for any other reluctant Democrats or maybe those who were waiting for the judicial process to play out. 10 more have come forward now. That number is at 41 Senate Democrats asking Menendez to resign his seat. And some of those who have not yet said anything are on the ethics committee that Ryan was just referencing. That's a committee that usually likes its members to stay mum. They like to do their own investigations if, of course, it comes to that. That's probably why we haven't heard from a few of these other Democratic senators. But you got to imagine that now that the verdict is in, most of them will come forward and say Menendez should go.
Yeah, I mean, the Senate's only expelled, Allie, 15 members in more than 230 years, as I'm sure you know. And Ryan just gave us a little history lesson, the last time being 1862. If he does refuse to resign, how would they move to kick him out, and what precedent does that set?
The process could be lengthy because the Senate likes to do its own investigation. That ethics committee that I was talking about needs to launch its own inquiry. They've been letting this play out in the courts thus far. But once they launch their own inquiry, they'll do their own investigation and then they'll present to the Senate. The Senate will then have an opportunity to vote and expel him based on what the ethics committee finds. The ethics committee is separate. Like, despite the fact that we've seen this court come forward with its verdict finding him guilty, the ethics committee is its own separate inquiry. They can, of course, rely on and use some of the information that's been made public and found through the courts, but at the same time, it's separate. Still, to expel him from the body would require a 2/3 majority vote. Frankly, they probably have those numbers, but in the past, when we've seen senators be indicted, most of them just let their terms lapse. The other open question here is, does Menendez keep running for his next term? He's doing so as an independent, but that bid was always contingent on what the courts found.
Allie, while we have you, you have new reporting out this morning on House Democrats announcing a big month in campaign fundraising. That's according to numbers shared first with NBC News. What more can you tell us?
Well, look, as we write in this story here that we were able to report first, House Democrats are pulling in $44 million in the second quarter of fundraising for this year. That is money that is going to go especially to vulnerable Democrats in frontline districts, but also to the overall effort of taking back the House majority. We know the reality of seeing these razor-thin margins over the last few years. Democrats are now hoping to be able to flip seats to their advantage on that. And look, it has been a tough time for Democrats broadly. These numbers are probably a bright spot, especially as we have seen many of these vulnerable frontline Democrats in swing districts that they need to hold on to voice their concern over the role that President Biden will play in their own reelection battles. As we track where fundraising dollars are going, we also know that Democratic donors have said they could cut off their funding to President Biden's reelection campaign, but a lot of that money is likely to get funneled further down ballot as efforts to flip the House and keep the Senate are top of mind for Democrats as well. This number certainly helps them out there.
All right, Allie, thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, staying with the 2024 race, President Biden is on the campaign trail in the important swing state of Nevada. His stop comes as we're learning more details about a proposal that could potentially alter the future of the Supreme Court. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us with the latest on this. Gabe, good morning.
Hey there, Savannah. Good morning. Multiple sources tell NBC News President Biden has already discussed his intentions for reforming the nation's highest court with some members of Congress. The proposed changes have not yet been finalized, but they could be rolled out in the coming weeks.
This morning, under pressure from progressives, President Biden considering major changes to the Supreme Court. Multiple sources telling NBC News the president has been working on a significant announcement about potential reforms to the high court, including term limits for justices and an updated enforceable ethics code. It all comes after the Supreme Court's controversial ruling earlier this month on presidential immunity.
This decision today has continued the court's attack in recent years on a wide range of long-established legal principles in our nation.
Notably, many of the expected proposals would require congressional approval. That's unlikely with a Republican-controlled House. Former President Trump calling the potential changes an unconstitutional attack. Meanwhile, President Biden is back on the campaign trail in Battleground, Nevada, referencing Mr. Trump's comments from the debate about immigrants taking, quote, black jobs.
Folks, I know what a black job is. It's the Vice President of the United States.
The president, in a new interview with BET News, asked what could change his mind about staying in the race.
If there had some medical condition that emerged, if the doctors came to me and said, you got this problem, that problem.
But the effort among some House Democrats to convince President Biden to step aside from the campaign is not over. NBC News obtained a new draft letter by lawmakers urging the Democratic National Committee not to speed up President Biden's nomination before the party's convention through a virtual roll call vote, writing stifling debate and prematurely shutting down any possible change to the Democratic ticket is a terrible idea. Two sources tell us more than 20 lawmakers have signed it. And this morning, multiple outlets reporting prominent Democrat Congressman Adam Schiff told donors Saturday, quote, I think if he is our nominee, I think we lose.
A spokesperson for Congressman Schiff declined to comment and asked for President Biden that Las Vegas appearance addressing the NAACP is part of a plan to court black and Latino voters. Today, He'll speak at a Latino civil rights conference there. Savannah.
All right, Gabe, thank you very much.
This morning, millions of Americans are waking up to more wild weather. Severe thunderstorms swept across the Midwest and Northeast, prompting flash flooding and widespread damage. NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin reports from New York's Central Park, which is still in the middle of another stifling heat wave.
This summer of weather extremes shows no signs of slowing. Last night, a likely tornado swept through Rome, New York, destroying 2 churches and flipping cars. More than 100,000 people now without power across the state. In the Midwest, flash flooding triggered 2 dam failures, with hundreds now evacuating. And earlier in the week, a reported tornado hit Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. This passenger says he was stuck on the plane when it happened.
I mean, it was turbulence on the ground. I was waiting for the thing to just rip apart on the runway. My kids were terrified.
The severe weather not only impacting planes, but trains too. Temperatures so hot, these tracks in the nation's capital melted. This summer's extreme heat has killed 73 people, with officials worried that number could rise. The mayor of New York City, which is now in the middle of its 3rd heat wave of the year, says the culprit is clear.
Climate change is here and is real, and it is a clear and present danger.
As more than 100 million Americans sweat through scorching temps on Tuesday.
We take like 10-minute breaks, water just to drink fluids.
In Houston, Christina Bourgeois says she spent a week sleeping in her car after Hurricane Beryl knocked out power to over 1 million Texans.
Our thanks to Aaron for that report. Some good news for Christina. The power did finally come back on last night, but more than 50,000 Texans are still without power.
Well, let's get a look at your morning News Now weather forecast.
NBC meteorologist Violetta Gaz is tracking the latest. Violetta, good morning.
Good morning. Well, we're still keeping an eye on some thunderstorms here across the Midwest, especially. Nothing severe at the moment, but you can still see some of the heavy rain that also triggered some flooding. This mainly impacting parts of Missouri down in through Arkansas at this hour. Some flood alerts in effect here, nearly 11 million impacted. Some flash flood warnings in effect as well. So even though we're not getting the damaging winds and things like that, it is still a soggy morning there across parts of the nation's midsection. We'll get some strong to severe storms in the area later today, but we'll also see that threat repeat here across that I-95 corridor. 48 million people at risk for damaging winds, meaning gusts to 60 miles per hour, and large hail as well. The tornado risk relatively low, but of course we know the damaging winds, the non-tornadic damaging winds, can still cause pretty significant damage. So the main area for that, from right around Boston, interior New England, all the way down through Richmond. This, of course, includes Philadelphia, New York City, and the D.C. metro area as well. So keep that in mind for late afternoon and evening. This is likely to impact the commute, at least in some parts of the area. So that cold front presses east, and we'll see that severe threat from Virginia all the way in through New Hampshire. Eventually, though, this does dive south, and this will bring a little bit of relief from the heat here across parts of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. But for tomorrow, we'll see the threat of storms continue here across the deep south, so they'll be stuck in that heat for a little bit longer. Now, heat alerts in effect for 82 million. They're a little bit scattered, but a little more concentrated here across that I-95 corridor. Expecting another sweltering day in Philadelphia. The heat has just been oppressive there, with heat indices very, very high and excessive heat warnings in effect. So what we can expect here for today, temperatures still into the 90s, but it's that heat index, right? The humidity has just been absolutely oppressive, and that's going to keep heat indices in the triple digits in places like Hartford down through D.C. Raleigh feeling like 105 and into triple digits as well down in through parts of the south. Notice we do start to get that comfort here across parts of the Great Lakes and Midwest, and that's going to slowly drift to the south and east for tomorrow. So that'll bring the temperature down a little bit. I wouldn't necessarily call it a refreshing or crisp day or anything like that, but I do think it'll make a difference, especially with that humidity. Temperatures do start to come up a little bit for the weekend. Notice by Saturday in New York specifically, we're right back to near 90 degrees, Sunday 89. So again, it won't be a drastic cool down, but I do think that drop in humidity will make a huge
every degree counts. Every degree.
That's what I'm talking about. Yes, and I think that the humidity will make a big difference, and it'll feel much, much better. And we do get a break from the storms as well.
Ooh, so we need that.
Yes.
Thank you, Violetta. Coming up, he's Donald Trump's running mate, and today he'll introduce himself to a national audience.
What we can expect to hear from JD Vance at tonight's high-stakes speech. Stay with us. More morning news now coming up after this. Welcome back. As we've mentioned, new vice presidential nominee Ohio Senator JD Vance will address the Republican National Convention tonight in Milwaukee. Senator Vance has served only a year and a half in Congress. So what clues can his record and background give us about how he might influence a second Trump term in the White House? NBC's Garrett Hake joins us from the RNC with more on this. Hey, Garrett, good morning.
Hey, Joe. Good morning. Senator Vance is so new to the national political scene. He's never attended a party convention before, much less spoken at one. Tonight, his speech is expected to lean heavily on his own personal biography as he tries to introduce both himself and his particular blend of conservatism to the country. Donald Trump's running mate, JD Vance, so far seen but not heard at the Republican convention, set to take center stage tonight. A largely unknown figure nationwide, Vance is already a celebrity in the Make America Great Again movement, where he's now seen as Mr. Trump's political heir apparent. What does the selection of JD Vance as Donald Trump's running mate mean for this party?
It means that MAGA has now an enduring battle plan. JD Vance is young, he is brilliant.
To his supporters, Vance's selection helps cement the now dominant Trump wing as the future of the GOP, where the freshman senator has been one of the loudest voices on Capitol Hill opposing additional funding for Ukraine.
We don't want to micromanage a foreign conflict thousands of miles away. That's not our job.
Vance's populism includes support for a higher minimum wage and backing Mr. Trump's aggressive trade policies, including higher tariffs on imported goods. Vance has long been an outspoken opponent of abortion, an issue that Mr. Trump has avoided highlighting. The Biden campaign seizing on Vance's past comments, including this in 2021 about exceptions for rape or incest.
Look, I think two wrongs don't make a right.
Vance has more recently said he would support some, quote, reasonable exceptions. Vance has also embraced some of Mr. Trump's most controversial proposals, including pursuing mass deportation of undocumented immigrants.
We have to deport people. We have to deport people who broke our laws, who came in here, and I think we start with the violent criminals.
Echoing the former president's false suggestions of widespread fraud in the last election.
If I had been vice president, I would have told the states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, and so many others that we needed to have multiple slates of electors, and I think the U.S. Congress should have fought over it from there.
And a key plank of Project 2025, a conservative think tank's plan for a second Trump administration, to overhaul the federal government by replacing civil servants with Trump political appointees, potentially firing thousands of government workers.
If those people aren't following the rules, then of course you've got to fire them.
Mr. Trump has distanced himself from Project 2025, and Vance has said only Donald Trump will determine the next administration's agenda. Vance's turn to shape the party, his backers say, will come later.
This is about winning elections on down the line in 28 and beyond.
I also think we can learn about Vance from his critics. This morning, Vice President Kamala Harris has a video out in which she suggests that Vance would be only loyal to Donald Trump and not to the country. And former Trump opponent Chris Christie has an op-ed in the New York Times in which he criticizes Vance for Vance's response to the assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life, that Vance was too quick to blame Democrats, and that shows that he wouldn't necessarily be the unifying figure that the Republican Party needs now. Joe?
All right, Garrett, thank you.
Let's get you international headlines now, starting with the latest on the Israel-Hamas war.
NBC News correspondent Danielle Hamamjian joined us with that and other world news. Danielle, good morning.
Good morning to you. Well, even if Israel has scaled down major ground offensives, the Palestinian death toll continues to rise on a daily basis. In the past few days, Israeli airstrikes killed more than 100 Palestinians in southern and central Gaza. One of those strikes hitting what Israel had declared a safe zone that was crowded with thousands of displaced people. Among those killed was local journalist Mohammed Mishmish, taking the total number of journalists killed so far to 160. On Tuesday, the IDF said it had eliminated half of the leadership of Hamas's military wing, that's the Al-Qassam brigades, with about 14,000 fighters wounded or killed since the war began. Israel's defense minister has now told his U.S. counterpart that military operations in Gaza have led to the conditions needed to reach a hostage deal. Turning now to South Asia, where in Bangladesh, at least 6 people have been killed amid violent student protests. Demonstrators are angry over the way public sector jobs are allocated in the country. It's a quota system that reserves more than half of government jobs to specific groups. Among them, the children of veterans from the War of 1971. It was the War of Independence against Pakistan. The students want recruitment based on merit instead. The country has ordered schools and universities to close until further notice. And finally, we have the first Paris Olympic winners, sort of. This is in the category of Olympic uniforms, and it looks like Team Mongolia has earned the top spot, at least according to the internet. The design is by Mongolian couture brand Michel and Amazonka. Fans have been praising the design and the intricately embroidered vests, dresses, and accessories, which will be worn during the opening ceremony on July 26th.
Yeah, those are all over TikTok because they're so beautiful. It's so neat how they did that.
And a reminder of all the cool looks we get to see during the Parade of Nations during the opening ceremony.
Danielle, thank you.
Coming up with days to go until the Olympics, the mayor of Paris takes a dip in the Seine to show, or at least try and show, it's clean enough for the summer games.
Well, what are experts saying? Well, we're going to put Paris's world-famous waterway under the microscope. That is up next. We are just over a week away from the start of the 2024 Olympic Games, and Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo is showcasing just how prepared the city is for incoming athletes. This morning, she took a dip in the Seine River to prove the water is safe for outdoor swimming events. The cleanup is part of a bigger effort to make the City of Light more environmentally friendly well after the games are over. NBC News international correspondent Megan Fitzgerald joins us from London with the details. Megan, good morning.
Savannah, good morning to you, and from a beautiful River Thames here in the heart of London, and we really could not have asked for a more beautiful day here. Look, you know, these bodies of water in the center of cities are just such a center point, a focal point for the city. It's the same in Paris with the River Seine. And as you mentioned this morning, French leaders are proving to the world that they are ready for the Paris Olympic Games. This morning, kicking off with a splash in Paris. Mayor Anne Hidalgo showing the world the River Seine, the centerpiece of the Olympic Games, is safe. The mayor taking the plunge, joined by the president of the Paris 2024 Games and other enthusiasts.
It's very cool, very, very nice, and it's amazing. It's amazing. A dream.
It's an Olympic Games that could turn back time.
Competitors in the 5-mile through Paris swim.
The Seine, once a watering hole for Parisians, has been banned to the public for over a century. Exceptions made for some organized events, including the triathlon test. Making it safe again has been a mission 9 years in the making, with a price tag of more than $1 billion. With a massive cleanup effort and a huge underground water basin that catches rainwater to reduce pollution, Paris officials say their efforts have been working. France's sports minister saying, "We've been dreaming of this, waiting for this." And some Americans testing it out for themselves.
So I've come back here to take a swim in the Seine before the Olympics. I'm very impressed with everything the French have done.
Although the quality of the Seine has occasionally been unswimmable after heavy rains. So the pressure is on with 2 Olympic events. The marathon and the swimming leg of the triathlon expected to take place in the river, along with an epic opening ceremony with athletes parading in boats down the Seine, the first time it's taken place outside of a stadium. An impressive endeavor that could make this year's games one for the ages. And look, you know, cleaning a massive body of water like the Seine is a huge undertaking. Officials say they will continue to monitor levels leading up to and through the Olympic Games, but they are confident that this will be a memorable Summer Olympics. Guys.
All right, Megan, thank you so much.
NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel is here with us in person to talk more about this fitting because you are on your way to Paris, and I assume jumping in the Seine is on your list, right?
Not the first thing on my list.
You want to go together? We'll hold hands.
We will, exactly.
Does it seem safe? I mean, what are your thoughts on all this?
So this is definitely one of the times where weather will play a key factor, because the things that can make it less safe are really storms. That's what's the X factor, not just for the Seine, but for any body of water. And if you have just a bad day of rain, it can bring in all that E. coli. It just comes in from both the sewage as well as just the kind of waste runoff. So I think nobody can control
What
that.
are the odds it's going to rain in Paris
Right.
over the course of 2+ weeks?
That's right. That's right.
So for people who, I guess I've learned in this that wild swimming, as it's called, is growing in popularity. Like going into these bodies of water that's not just like the pool in your backyard. Right. What do people need to think about, especially if they're not going in the one that happens to have this $1 million cleanup project going on?
I think people need to just think about the fact that you're swimming in what you're swimming in, and you need to take precautions. I always try to remind people, try not to swallow water. I know that sounds really trivial. Some people, I also recommend nose plugs, just to make sure you're not getting as little bit of water in, and then 100% of the time you should immediately rinse off and shower, because that's exactly where you're just going to have a higher risk of having any material that could somehow get into any cuts in the skin, or even accidentally putting your hand to your mouth. So it's just something that even if you're swimming in the Hudson, it doesn't matter where you are, you should take those precautions.
That's one environmental factor here, is the river, but there's also just the heat. Obviously, we're dealing with it in America right now. We don't know exactly what it's going to be like in Paris during the Olympics. You say it's been mild lately, but what are some of the things on your mind when it comes to that? Athletes, but also spectators.
Right. It's spectators that I worry the most about, because they've done such a great job in Paris, infrastructure-wise, to make sure everyone's secure, everyone's safe, that they can have this experience watching the Olympics from anywhere. But that also means you're exposed to heat at multiple points. They're also trying to restrict how many items you're bringing in. I'm just trying to remind people, make sure you bring some hydration with you. You can bring water bottles to the Olympics. Make sure that they do. But then also wearing, it might sound counterintuitive, wearing cooler clothing. So wearing clothing that can kind of protect your skin from some of that direct heat. And then obviously, like, try to find shade. I know they're doing that at the Olympics and trying to provide kind of cooling stations and things like that. But hydrate, 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 even as far in advance, because some of these events are taking place smack in front of the Eiffel Tower. Beautiful, but right in the sun.
If we could just for a moment go back to the Seine. Yes. I guess part of what is confusing to me, and probably then for people at home, is even if they go through this work of doing what they're doing right now to try to make it safer, to try to make it clean, to try to make it not a biohazard to jump in there, it's just open. I mean, there's going to be so many tourists there. You could just throw trash in. You end up seeing things in there that you just don't really want to swim by.
Yeah, and I think for competitive athletes, right, they want to have that certainty of what they're swimming in, because they've been training for years for their life. I think what's been reassuring is that many of the teams, and including some of the ones I've spoken to, have actually done some of this kind of wild swimming in order to train for this. So I think that element of surprise is something they're expecting, but I think that's also something that the Seine is such a long riverbed, and how can you make sure that nobody does anything? And I think that's where we could run into trouble. But I really do think the critical piece here is Mother Nature. A rainstorm can bring up the bacteria levels 2 to 3 times. And so that's really what I think they're monitoring for. And I know that there are plenty of people, including the mayor of Paris, who are trying to kind of reassure people. But it's going to take kind of up to the moment, and I hope it works. So we're all hoping for good weather.
I think it's fair they're not going to try this in L.A., right?
They're not, no. I think that the LA 2028
you need a river.
Olympics are
a river.
I think the LA 2028 are taking a lot of notes and trying to make sure that anything that could ruin the athlete's experience or the attendees' experience, that they optimize, you know. So we're crossing our fingers, hoping for the best, but I don't see Savannah and I jumping in the river day one, let's say.
All right. Dr. Kavita Patel, good to see you so much.
If there's anybody I would do it with, that would make me feel like
That's right.
Well, I think the gauntlet has been dropped, and now I'm waiting to see you two.
That's right.
In the Seine. After a rainstorm.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's take a look at what's making financial news. Elon Musk is leaving the Golden State to make Texas the new home of SpaceX and X. CNBC's Savannah Hanau is that and more. Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. Yeah, so Elon Musk says he's moving the headquarters for SpaceX NX to Texas from California. Musk citing a new school gender identity law signed by Governor Gavin Newsom this week as the, quote, last straw. Now, with these steps, Musk has now relocated Tesla and most of the companies he controls or runs to Texas. He moved his own residency in 2021 to Texas, where there is no state income tax. The WNBA's new media deal is taking shape. The New York Times and The Athletic reporting the league is set to receive about $2.2 billion over the next 11 years in rights, fees, or roughly $200 million a year. Now, the NBA negotiated the WNBA deal during its own media rights talks, where it reached an agreement with Disney, NBC, and Amazon on an 11-year, $75 billion contract. Those companies will also have their own WNBA media packages. And we may be sweltering in the summer heat, but Home Depot wants you to start thinking about the spooky season. The chain is kicking off its Halloween decor sale tomorrow. You can get your hands on some of Home Depot's most popular items, including the 12-foot animated skeleton Skelly and his sidekick Skelly Dog. Other items include a 7-foot animated Frankenstein, Joe.
It's too early. It's too early.
Too early.
All right.
I'm still trying to drink my cocktails outside.
Exactly. Thank you, Silvana. Appreciate it.
You got it.
This summer, it's not just millions of Americans who are flocking to beaches on the East Coast. We're also seeing a rise in shark sightings close to shore. We're digging into what's behind the spike and what you need to know to stay safe. That's next. We are back with a milestone moment for music in space. Rapper Missy Elliott is now the first hip-hop artist to have a song beamed into deep space. NASA transmitted her 1997 hit The Rain, Super Duper Fly, all the way to Venus. NASA's space director says it's the perfect collaboration since both Missy's music and space exploration are all about pushing boundaries. Now, Elliott is also known for incorporating space and futuristic visuals into her music videos, and her current tour is called Out of This World. Fun fact, took 14 minutes for the song to travel 158 million miles from Earth to Venus at the speed of light. How cool is that? It has been 50 years since Peter Benchley's surprise bestseller Jaws became the beach read of the summer. Now, it's definitely a work of fiction, but with shark sightings on the rise, it feels like the story is becoming a frightening reality for East Coast vacationers this summer. NBC News correspondent Emily Ikeda is in Cape Cod, where some of those sharks have actually been spotted.
Hey there. Well, sharks in this region have been spotted swimming as close as 50 feet to shore in recent days, which is why you'll see flags like this flying every day as a reminder that the apex predator is lurking in these waters. Even before visitors get to the shoreline, they are greeted by signs like this, which you can see shows they're expecting shark activity to continue to increase as we go deeper into summer. Summertime on the East Coast means hot weather, packed beaches, and a growing number of sharks lurking just offshore.
This morning we got a notification there was one 20 yards off that beach over there.
Shark monitoring data revealing just how close they are. On Long Island, New York, a beach was temporarily closed to swimming Monday after a 7-foot shark was spotted just 25 feet offshore. Another shark captured by an NYPD drone on the Rockaways over the weekend. Researchers say modern technology is allowing more people to capture a glimpse of this ancient species.
In terms of shark sightings, we see increasingly more because many more people have drones. And so people are much more aware of animals in the water.
While experts say estimating population numbers is difficult, there are signs in New York and New England white shark populations are rebounding. Are people around here a little bit more aware of the sharks?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
While in Florida and along the Gulf Coast, blacktip reef sharks are thriving.
He was out there lurking around, and I says, well, I'm not going any further than knee deep out here today. That's for sure.
The seasonal activity in the Atlantic comes after several high-profile attacks in the Pacific, including the death of Hawaiian surfing star Tamayo Perry, killed by a shark off the island of Oahu, and Californian Caleb Adams, who survived being bitten by a white shark while swimming off Del Mar.
It was a strong hit to my body. I knew I had been hit by a shark.
At Carpinteria in Southern California, researchers found juvenile great whites swim near people 97% of the time with no attacks. Shark attacks are incredibly rare, scientists say, especially when you consider the millions of people in the water every day.
If sharks wanted to target people, we'd have 10,000 shark bites a day. People would be such easy targets. Sharks are actually trying to avoid people to the extent that they can.
Experts say shark activity shouldn't change your vacation plans. What's important here is to be shark smart, which means you want to be aware of marine life, especially schools of fish and seals. You'll see a lot of those here. Avoid murky water and always listen to your lifeguards. Here that means you don't want to go deeper than your waist. Back to you.
All right, Shark Smart. Emily, thank you. Finally this hour, you've heard of college students working summer jobs to help pay for school. But a couple of friends in Michigan are taking the idea to new depths. Anchor Mark Gillette from our NBC affiliate in Traverse City, Michigan, dives into their success story.
What better way to save some extra money for college?
There are worse ways to save money for college than doing this. A realization that hit Michigan Tech senior engineering students Ben Vanderhind and Brett Bruner kind of out of the blue when Brett here dropped his phone in Lake Superior.
And my first thought was, oh, we have scuba diving equipment. So I kind of triangulated my location, and about 5 hours later, we were back in the water going down, and Ben actually found it.
The pair knew they weren't the only ones who accidentally dropped things in deep water, but were one of the few folks who had the equipment and skills to go in after them and retrieve them from the bottom.
So it all started off when my uncle reached out and said, hey, my friend dropped some fishing equipment. Like, would you guys go to, like, recover it? You know, he'll give you some money. And we're like, oh, that's a good idea.
A good idea that turned into a summer job.
We've been pretty busy. We get a lot of messages for phones or fishing equipment or stuff here and there. I'm sure, as you can believe, we get a lot after the 4th of July when everybody's out in the water and people are bound to lose stuff then. So people send us a message and see if we can't find whatever they dropped off their boat or any accidents that happen like that.
Some jobs are easy. Others require a little more skill, luck, and patience.
It really depends a lot on the water. If we're out here in the bay or some of the clearer lakes like Elk Lake, we've got a really good success rate if you got a good location on it. I would say at that point it's probably 80 or 90%. Some of the inland lakes, that's where things get dicey. If there's weeds on the bottom or a lot of muck and silt, it's almost impossible. We'll bring out an underwater metal detector.
Cell phones and fishing gear seem to be the most frequent calls, but this pair's up for just about anything. They get to dive, something they love to do. They get paid, something they need for college, and they get the reward of bringing stuff back to the surface from someplace it never should have been.
Well, the reaction is, first off, wow, you found it. Like, when you drop something in the water, you don't expect it to be recovered. So first they're like that, and then they're just very happy that they took this opportunity to let us out there and get in the water.
What a smart idea. Our thanks to Mark Gillette for that story. Maybe they want to head to the River Seine in Paris for the Olympic Games. Just saying. All right, that is going to do it for this hour of morning news now. But stick with us. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.